Madam Speaker, I have the honor this afternoon to present to the National Assembly budget proposals for the financial year 2017-2018. Madam Speaker, honorable members may recall that the 11th National Development Plan, NDP 11 for short, was approved by this honorable House in December 2016. Hence, the 2017-2018 budget proposals are the first installment out of 6 budgetary outlays for implementation of NDP 11, whose theme is, I quote, inclusive growth for realization of employment creation and poverty eradication, close quote. I wish at this point, Madam Speaker, to reaffirm government's commitment to the principle of national development planning and to state that this principle has never been violated, contrary to the perception from certain quarters that NDP 10 was at one point suspended. NDP 10 was never suspended, Madam Speaker. Instead, it was extended by 1 year to 31st March 2017 with the approval, I must say, of this House. Madam Speaker, the approval of NDP 11 by Parliament followed extensive consultations with various national stakeholders, which resulted in the identification of several national priorities that have to be pursued in the medium term to address the development challenges of unemployment, very importantly, poverty and income inequality. In this regard, a significant amount of the financial year 2017-2018 budget will accordingly be allocated to these priorities, as they are key in promoting inclusive economic growth, which is a necessary condition to address these development challenges that I have just mentioned, 3 of them. Madam Speaker, these challenges should be considered against an unfavorable economic environment of subdued economic growth worldwide, not just in Botswana, but worldwide, characterized by continued uncertainties over global economic performance, weak global demand for commodities, and associated low commodity prices. These, in turn, I'm afraid, affect the expected performance of the domestic economy, reflecting its dependence on the global economy, particularly for the sale of diamonds. Hence, Madam Speaker, continued prudential financial management during this and subsequent financial years remains essential. Honorable members, to set the context for these budget proposals, I shall briefly review the global, regional, and domestic economic situation. The outcome of such a review forms the basis for estimating available resources and thus the ability for government to undertake planned programs and projects for the next financial year. So, economic review and outlook, starting with global performance and outlook. Madam Speaker, the global economic performance continues to be subdued, largely driven by uncertainty associated with Britain's exit from the European Union, the risk arising from the rebalancing in the Chinese economy, slow recovery of commodity prices, and declining volumes of trade. As a result, the International Monetary Fund's outlook of January 2017, last month, projected a modest global growth of 3.1% in 2016, down, I'm afraid, from 3.2% recorded during 2015. Growth in emerging market and developing economies was expected to reach 4.1% in 2016, the same rate that was recorded during 2015. Growth in advanced economies was forecast to decline from 2.1% in 2015 to 1.6% in 2016. Sub-Saharan Africa, on the other hand, was anticipated to record a lower growth, and we are part of this region, a lower growth of 1.6% in 2016, down from 3.4% in 2015. The global economic outlook for 2017 is, however, positive, Madam Speaker, with global growth rate expected to reach 3.4%, underpinned by continued positive growth of 4.5% in emerging and developing economies during the year. Growth in advanced economies is also expected to improve slightly from 1.6% in 2016 to 1.9% in 2017, while sub-Saharan Africa economies are expected to recover from 1.6% in 2016 to reach 2.8% in 2017. Regional review and outlook. Madam Speaker, the Southern African Development Community, SADC for short, region is expected to record a lower average real GDP growth rate of 3.1% in 2016 compared to 3.5% achieved in 2015. Average inflation rose from 7% in September 2015 to 12% in September 2016. Performance of the external sector is also expected to be weak in 2016, mainly due to the decline in terms of trade. Now I move, Madam Speaker, back home to the domestic economic performance and outlook. Economic growth and outlook. Madam Speaker, the latest data released by Statistics Botswana, based on audited accounts of the companies, indicates that the domestic economy contracted by 1.7% in 2015 compared to a positive growth rate of 4.1% recorded in 2014. This negative growth was mainly due to weak performance of the mining sector, as we all know. The non-mining sectors also registered a lower growth of 1.7% in 2015 compared to 4.9% in 2014, reflecting the impact of water and electricity disruptions on the rest of the economy. The outlook for 2016 is, however, positive, with the domestic economy expected to recover and record a growth rate of 2.9% for the year, and is forecast to reach 4.2% for 2017. Monetary policy and inflation. Madam Speaker, price stability, I must emphasize, is one of the important elements for macroeconomic stability, the latter being a necessary condition for economic growth and job creation in the country. It is therefore pleasing to note that the domestic annual rate of inflation has remained within the Bank of Botswana objective range of 3 to 6% during 2016. The rate of inflation actually declined from 3.1% in December 2015 to 3% in December 2016. In the medium term, the domestic inflation outlook remains positive due to low domestic demand and continued stability in global oil prices. As a result of the positive inflationary outlook, the Bank of Botswana has again, emphasizing again, maintained an accommodative monetary policy stance over the past year, reducing the bank rate from 6% in July 2016 to 5.5% the following month in August 2016. This policy stand is expected to encourage borrowing for investment purposes. The low inflation environment is necessary for fostering international competitiveness of our domestic industries and to support economic growth and what else? Employment creation. Balance of payments and foreign exchange reserves. Madam Speaker, the preliminary balance of payments projections for 2016 point to a surplus of 5 billion pula compared to a deficit of 57 million pula recorded in 2015. This significantly larger surplus in 2016 is mainly due to a positive current account balance, which is projected to record a larger surplus of 25.7 billion in 2016 compared to 10.5 billion in 2015. Exports are expected to have grown by 21%, while imports are expected to decrease by 9% in 2016. At the end of December 2016, foreign exchange reserves stood at 76.8 billion pula, compared to 84.9 billion pula in December 2015, representing a decline of 9.5%. In terms of the US dollar and the special drawing rights, these reserves stood at 7.2 billion US dollars and 5.3 billion SDR respectively. These levels of reserves are equivalent to 17 months of import cover for goods and services. Exchange rate developments, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the management of our exchange rate continues to be focused on ensuring competitiveness of domestic industries in both regional and international markets. That's the whole purpose of managing the exchange rate. The objective of the management of the Pula exchange rate mechanism is to maintain a stable, really effective exchange rate through regular adjustment of the basket weights in line with the country's trade patterns and the rate of call. In this regard, I wish to indicate that in January 2017, last month, the current basket weights were adjusted to 45% South African rand and 55% SDR, and the upward rate of call was reduced from 0.38% to 0.26%. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, in October 2016, the Chinese renminbi, RMB, that is the Chinese currency, was included in the SDR basket, inevitably becoming part of the Pula basket. This change followed the 5-year review of the composition of the SDR basket by the International Monetary Fund. Madam Speaker, I now move to the section of the speech that we titled the Priority Areas for 2017-2018 financial year. Madam Speaker, NDP 11, approved by this House, specifies 6 priority areas that have to be addressed in the medium term. These areas are, and I have mentioned them before, and they need to be re-emphasized. 1, development of diversified sources of economic growth and revenues. 2, human capital development. 3, social development. 4, sustainable use of natural resources. 5, consolidation of good governance and strengthening of national security. And lastly, 6, monitoring and evaluation. These priority areas will be guiding the process of budget formulation during the plan period, the entire plan period, starting with the budget proposals for 2017-2018 financial year, which I'm going to deal with extensively later on. Details of some of these programs and projects proposed for the 2017-18 financial year to address these national priorities are provided later in the speech under the subsection dealing with development budget. I shall now address each of the national priorities in turn. This is the main emphasis of the speech. First, developing diversified sources of economic growth and revenue, starting with diversified sources of economic growth before I deal with the revenue. Madam Speaker, between the financial years 1988, 1989, and 2014-2015, there has been a notable change in the composition of Botswana's gross domestic product. This period is characterized by growth in various non-mining sectors, such as finance, business and services, trade, hotels and restaurants, and transport and communications. These sectors are currently contributing significantly to value addition, while the contribution of the mining sector has declined from over 50% in 1988-89 to around 20% in 2014-2015. Despite this structural transformation in the value addition, the country, I'm afraid, continues to be heavily dependent on exports and revenues from diamonds. As at the end of 2015, diamonds export accounted for 83.1% of total exports, while mineral revenue accounted for 30.4% of total government revenue. There is therefore a need, Madam Speaker, to diversify our exports, which have remained the same and largely dominated by diamonds. It is for this reason that the development of diversified sources of economic growth and revenue was identified as one of the priority areas to be pursued during NDP 11. Madam Speaker, during NDP 10, which ends in March 2017, our economy grew on average by about 3.8%. The economy is also forecast to grow at an average of 4.4% per annum over the entire period of NDP 11. These growth rates, Madam Speaker, are lower than the early 1980s rates of 7 to 9%, and are indeed even lower than the SADC regional target of 5%. Such rates, I must indicate, are therefore not sufficient to adequately address developmental challenges of unemployment, poverty eradication, and income inequality. With regards, Madam Speaker, with regards to employment creation, it is important to clarify that the principal role of the government is not to create jobs directly, but to provide a conducive macroeconomic environment to facilitate the development of the private sector. The private sector, in turn, is expected to take advantage of such an environment to undertake investments which would contribute to the growth of the economy and the creation of sustainable employment opportunities. I will repeat this paragraph, Madam Speaker, because it is extremely important in terms of perception as to where we should expect employment to be generated. I repeat, Madam Speaker, with regard to employment creation, it is important to clarify